Two Deathworlders walked into a war and taught a galaxy a lesson. The deck plates of the exploration vessel Prometheus screamed in protest, a cacophony of twisting metal and groaning bulkheads that clawed at Captain Arion Jex's sanity. Red lights pulsed in rhythm with the ship's death rattle, painting the bridge in a frantic, bloody glow. On the main view screen, the chaos of the spatial storm was a personal insult, a raw, elemental force that defied all of humanity's technological hubris. Jex's stomach churned with a primal fear he hadn't felt since his days as a cadet on the training planet, and the thought was a cold knot in his gut. They were utterly, completely alone. "Gravimetric field's collapsing, Captain. We're losing the portside atmosphere seal," the comms officer, Lieutenant Alina Petrova, shouted, her voice tight with terror. Jex's hands clenched the command chair, his knuckles white. He could feel every shudder of the ship, a physical violation that went straight into his bones. "Torres, I need an engine status report, now." "Primary propulsion is gone, Captain. Auxiliary is, well, it's not auxiliary anymore, it's just scrap metal." The engineer's frantic voice crackled over the comms. "We're in a dead zone, sir. The beacon signal isn't getting out." Just as the silence of their impending doom began to settle in, a new voice cut through the static, a series of sharp, clicking chitters that the ship's translator rendered into a precise, if slightly stilted, English. "Prometheus, this is the Draari science vessel G-Car. We are also disabled. Our biosystems are in critical failure, and our structural integrity is compromised." Jex stared at the tactical display, a new blip appearing. Hope warred with a deep, weary cynicism. "Acknowledged, G-Car. This is Captain Jex. What are your intentions?" "Our intentions are to survive," the Draari voice replied, and Jex could almost hear the clicks of mandibles, a sound that carried a grim understanding. It was Ambassador Kale, a name Jex knew from the diplomatic briefings. He had always been told the Draari were cold, methodical, but there was something else in Kale's tone now, a hint of vulnerability. "One organism cannot survive an overwhelming predatory threat. Two, however, might have a chance. Your species and mine, we are both adaptable. Our survival relies upon a joint effort. We must manually tether our comm systems to get a signal out, but your docking ports are not compatible with our hulls." The proposal was insane. The risk was unimaginable. Yet Jex felt an odd sense of calm. This was his home, a place of controlled chaos and unpredictable ingenuity. "All right, Kale, we'll do it your way. Let's see if two Deathworld species can get out of this mess. Torres, get a team ready. We're going outside." The next few hours were a grueling physical struggle against the storm. The human team, led by Lieutenant Ronan Hayes, used a fusion torch and whatever salvage they could find, their small, nimble bodies maneuvering through the debris fields. The Draari were not like them. Their repair teams, led by Ambassador Kale himself, worked with a terrifying, silent efficiency. Jex watched Kale through a small view screen, the ambassador a towering figure with a gleaming exoskeleton, using his immense strength to physically manipulate the collapsing hull plates. He didn't use a torch. He used his own body, his biological resilience a tool in itself. Jex couldn't help but feel a pang of awe, a silent acknowledgement of the strength forged on a different, but equally brutal world. Inside the Prometheus, the air was thick with ozone. Lieutenant Ronan Hayes knelt over a sparking console, the ship's emergency light strobing red across his sweat-streaked face. The blaring alarms were no longer a sound. They were a physical presence, a high-pitched whine that rattled his teeth, and a thrumming vibration that went straight into his bones. His gloves were useless now, too thick for the delicate work. He worked with a frantic calm, his mind a hurricane of calculations and grim possibilities. A Draari observer, Counselor Lauren, stood just outside the corridor, his 8 eyes blinking in a sequence of what Ronan knew was silent anxiety. "Your method, it is entirely unscheduled. Are you not risking a catastrophic power surge?" Ronan didn't look up, his fingers moving with impossible speed. "Yeah, probably, but the whole ship is a catastrophic power surge right now, so what's the worst that can happen?" He found the final pair of wires he needed and with a precision born of instinct and sheer exhaustion, twisted them together. A shower of green sparks erupted, and for a heart-stopping second, the alarms shrieked higher, then cut out completely. A blessed silence. Ronan let out a ragged breath, slumping back against a bulkhead. The relief was so profound it almost brought him to his knees. The Draari, Lauren, let out a series of quiet clicks. "Fascinating. You gambled with the survival of the vessel on an act of pure intuition?" Ronan looked up, offering a tired smile. "On Terra, Counselor, we call that a calculated risk. Or, Tuesday." He looked directly at the Draari. "It's not intuition. It's trust. You trust your body, and we trust our instincts. We all just want to get home." This time, the Draari mandibles clicked, not in confusion, but in a new kind of understanding. By the time the 2 ships were finally linked and the distress signal was sent, the shared experience had forged something new. The Alliance's diplomatic briefs had called them aggressive, dangerous, territorial. But out here, they were just 2 species from planets that had tried to kill them, finding a common language in the struggle to survive. As Captain Jex looked at the Draari vessel, he felt a silent, profound respect for Ambassador Kale. He had seen the raw power of the Draari and the pragmatism that underlay it. They were partners, forged in fire and fear, and in that shared ordeal, Jex realized they weren't alone after all.
The Galaxia Alliance's Grand Chamber was a testament to millennia of comfortable evolution. The air, filtered to a perfect, non-toxic blend for a dozen species, hummed with a serene, manufactured calm that felt to Admiral Kalen Vance like a prison. He stood at the central podium, his dress uniform feeling suffocatingly formal. The luminary, Counselor Jael, pulsed gently, their voice a soothing chime that grated on Kalen's nerves. Beside him, War Commander Zern, his burnished copper exoskeleton gleaming, was a study in controlled fury. Kalen could feel the tension radiating off the Draari, a silent storm threatening to erupt. Zern's mandibles clicked in a rhythmic pattern, a sound that, in this pristine hall, was a raw, primal expression of a species being forced to wait while its home was threatened. "And so, Admiral Vance, Commander Zern," Jael chimed, "we must once again express our concerns about the recent unsanctioned military cooperation between your species. Such ad hoc alliances, born of instinct rather than protocol, are exactly the kind of behavior the Galaxia Alliance was created to prevent." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Kalen's mind replayed the terror of the spatial storm, the quiet courage of the Draari, the silent pact of survival they had forged. It was a bond born of shared struggle, and these beings in their polished chamber saw it only as a flaw. "It's concerning," a gelatinous form, Counselor Lauren rippled, a deep purple hue indicating his distress. "Your survival instincts are, by definition, aggressive. Our protocols exist to protect us all from such tendencies." Kalen felt a cold, quiet anger settle in his gut. They weren't seeing him. They were seeing a label. Deathworlder. He looked at Zern, who returned the gaze with a slow, deliberate series of blinks that Kalen understood instantly. "They will not see until it is too late." "With all due respect, counselors," Kalen began, his voice even, "the tendencies you speak of saved both our ships. What you called instinct, we call adaptation. And right now, we have a far more pressing threat to discuss. Commander Zern, if you would." Zern stepped forward, his massive frame a stark silhouette against the soft lighting. He placed a four-limbed hand on the podium, the sound a dull thud that made several delegates flinch. His translated voice was like gravel being crushed, deep and unsettling in the serene chamber. Our intelligence has confirmed that the Scourge has re-emerged. They have established a new base on the edge of the galaxy. The scale of their construction suggests a force far larger than what we have previously encountered. A holographic projection shimmered above the podium, showing satellite imagery of a massive, organic-looking structure clinging to a barren asteroid. It was a dark, pulsating mass of chitin and biomechanical hybrid material, a festering wound on the elegant, star-filled projection of the galactic map. The sight sent a shiver through Kalen, a reminder of the things that existed in the universe that did not care about diplomacy or peace. "We have received the same reports," High Counselor Arcanus, a luminary elder, confirmed, her voice a soothing chime that cut through the unease. "But they are merely building. They have not yet attacked. We can send a diplomatic envoy to establish communication and de-escalate the situation." Kalen felt a surge of disbelief so profound it was almost dizzying. De-escalate. The word felt meaningless. He looked at Zern, whose mandibles were now clicking in a furious, almost frantic rhythm. He knew exactly what the Draari commander was thinking, because he was thinking the same thing.
De-escalate? Kalen's voice was sharper now, a blade cutting through the calm air. "Counselor, this isn't a border dispute. The Scourge is a hive-mind organism that consumes, not communicates. We have intelligence logs. They don't talk, they assimilate. They don't want territory, they want biomass. Every living thing is just fuel." "Admiral, please." Counselor Laron rippled, his hue a deep, distressed purple. "You speak of them as if they are animals. Surely even they must have some form of reason, some logic to their existence." This was the part that broke Kalen's heart. They were so blinded by their own peaceful history, they couldn't conceive of a threat that didn't play by their rules. "They have a logic, Counselor." Zern's voice rumbled, heavy with a terrible exhaustion. "A simple one. They consume to grow. That is their purpose. To believe otherwise is to gamble with our lives on a scale that is biologically unsound." Before the debate could continue, a smaller holographic screen flared to life. Dr. Ilara Reed stood beside researcher Vex, her face calm but her eyes burning with an unshakable resolve. "Apologies for the interruption, High Counselor," Dr. Reed began, her voice calm but urgent. "But researcher Vex and I have completed our analysis of the biological fragments we retrieved. Our joint report confirms Admiral Vance's findings. The Scourge is not a conventional enemy. Its metabolism is an engine of pure consumption. They don't eat for sustenance. They consume to replicate. Their biology is designed for exponential growth. The diplomatic approach will merely give them more time to grow stronger." A tense silence fell over the chamber. The gravity of the words finally began to sink in. But the fear was mixed with a deeper, more unsettling emotion for the Alliance delegates. Helplessness. They were a civilization built on diplomacy and philosophy, and they had just been told that their greatest tools were useless. High Counselor Arcanus finally spoke, her tones subdued. "These are grave tidings indeed, but as your report is preliminary, we must still proceed with caution. The Alliance will authorize a small, heavily shielded diplomatic vessel to approach the Scourge base. We will attempt contact." The words hit Kalen and Zern like a physical blow. Kalen felt Zern's subtle tensing beside him, the silent, shared horror. They had presented indisputable evidence, a clear and present danger, and the Alliance's response was to send a delegation with pleasantries to a species that saw them as food. The gap between Deathworlders and Garden-Worlders had never felt wider or more terrifying. "Very well, High Counselor," Kalen said, his voice flat, devoid of any hope. He knew what would happen. He knew the diplomatic vessel would be the Scourge's first meal. The Alliance would only act when it was staring extinction in the face. And by then, it would be too late.
The Galaxia Alliance's diplomatic vessel, a shining symbol of hope and naivety, disappeared from the star charts a week after it departed. There was no distress signal, no final transmission, just a sudden, silent void where it had been. The High Counselor's office sent a flurry of unanswered queries before a single, chilling message was retrieved from a deep space data buoy. A rhythmic clicking, followed by a scream that cut off mid-cry. It was enough. The Alliance was paralyzed by a fear it didn't know how to process. But Kalen Vance and Zern were not. On the bridge of the UES Intrepid, the air was thick with a new, grim determination. The time for diplomacy had passed. Admiral Kalen Vance watched the tactical display, his expression grim, but his eyes alight with the clear focus of a man who knew what had to be done. The Draari had arrived, not as allies, but as brothers in arms. "They're still debating engagement protocols," Lieutenant Elena Petrova reported from the comm station, her voice laced with disbelief. "They want to know if we've attempted any form of non-lethal de-escalation." Kalen felt a cold laugh bubble in his throat. "Tell them our form of de-escalation involves cutting their fleet into a million pieces," he muttered, his eyes fixed on the display. Over the past few weeks operating outside the Alliance's stifling bureaucracy, humans and Draari had been working in a desperate, secret synergy. Human innovation, fueled by centuries of surviving against all odds on Terra, combined with Draari brute force and biological precision. They had developed a new class of ships and a combat doctrine that broke every known tactical rule. The view screen flickered to life, showing the imposing form of War Commander Zern on the bridge of his flagship, the Oblivion. The Draari vessel was a sleek, organic-looking dreadnought, its chitinous armor shifting with iridescent blues and greens. "Admiral Vance," Zern's translated voice rumbled, a deep, resonant hum that was a comfort in the cold silence of space. "My warriors are in position. We stand with you." "And we with you, Commander," Kalen replied, a small, genuine smile gracing his lips. He saw the grim resolve in Zern's 4 eyes, a mutual understanding that went deeper than words. They had been judged by a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight, and now they would save it. "Are your observers comfortable?" Zern's mandibles clicked, a sound Kalen had come to recognize as a laugh. "Counselor GL is currently experiencing a subspace vibrational cascade. The concept of a battle simulation was upsetting to his constitution." Kalen chuckled, a hollow sound on the quiet bridge. "Lauren seems to be holding up slightly better, though I suspect that's only because his species lacks a conventional digestive system." He took a deep breath, the hum of the ship's engines a comfortingly familiar sound. "Very well. Signal all ships. Operation Last Stand is a go. Let's make this a day to remember."
Lieutenant Ronan Hayes' fighter, the Valkyrie, shuddered under the strain of a high-G turn. The cockpit was a symphony of blaring alarms and flashing lights, a sound he had grown to appreciate as a sign that the ship was still alive. His squadron of 12 human raptors was engaged in a furious dogfight with a swarm of Scourge drones, their organic hulls and razor-sharp limbs a grotesque mockery of a fighter. "Raptor 3, break left! You've got one on your tail!" Ronan shouted into his comms, his voice strained. The battle was a 3-dimensional ballet of life and death, an intricate, frantic dance they had trained for in secret. He rolled his own fighter, lining up a shot on a drone pursuing his wingman. The pilot, a young recruit, was panicking. "I see him, Raptor lead. Can't shake him. These bugs can pull Gs that would turn us into jelly." Ronan's targeting computer locked onto the Scourge drone, and he triggered a simulated missile launch. His HUD flashed, "Miss!" The Scourge pilot had detected the launch and executed an evasion maneuver that should have been physically impossible. "How the hell?" Ronan began, before his own warning system screamed. A drone had gotten on his 6. Engine critical. Simulated kill. His controls locked up. "Damn it," Ronan swore, his heart hammering against his ribs. He watched helplessly as the remaining members of his squadron were methodically picked off. He felt a moment of pure, unadulterated fear. What if this wasn't just a simulation? What if they were outmatched, and the Alliance's fear was right? Suddenly, a communication channel opened, and the face of his Draari opponent, Pilot Zoran, appeared on his screen. His mandibles were spread in what Ronan had learned was a gesture of respect. "Excellently fought, Lieutenant Hayes," his translator chittered, the voice carrying a warmth that belied his alien form. "Your tactics were creative, if ultimately futile." Despite the loss, Ronan felt a sudden wave of relief at the sight of the Draari. "Your pilots move like they're not bound by physics, Commander. What's your secret?" Zoran made a sound that the translator didn't catch, something between a chuckle and a hiss. "Nothing so exotic. We simply evolved on a world with 1.3 times your gravity, and with predators that could strike from any direction. Our bodies are our ships. Your strength is in your tools, ours is in our biology." "So what you're saying is," Ronan joked, a genuine smile spreading across his face, "I need to start working out in a high-gravity chamber?" "It would be a start, though I doubt your endoskeleton could ever match our natural advantages." Ronan's smile widened. He felt a deep, unspoken bond with this alien. "Maybe not, but give us humans time. We're pretty good at adapting. It's kind of our thing." "As is ours. Perhaps that is why our species understand each other, while the rest of the galaxy fears us both." As Ronan's fighter systems came back online, he turned toward the Intrepid, a sense of purpose renewed. He was a human pilot, flying a human ship, but his training had been with the Draari. He understood their ferocity, their silent strength, and they understood his wild ingenuity. The rest of the galaxy saw two dangerous Deathworld species, but all Ronan saw was the potential for humanity to learn and grow stronger from the competition, and maybe, just maybe, make a friend along the way.
2 weeks after the decisive battle against the Scourge, the Galaxia Alliance's Grand Chamber was no longer a place of serene, detached diplomacy. It was a place of humbled gratitude. The air, once so perfectly sterile, felt heavy with the weight of recent loss and newfound respect. The delegates, once so proud of their peaceful evolution, now looked upon the human and Draari representatives with an awe that was both reluctant and profound. The elegant mosaics and serene lighting seemed to mock their previous complacency. The fear they had once held for these Deathworlders had been replaced by a quiet understanding of their resilience. High Counselor Arcanus stood at the central podium, her luminous form pulsing with the subdued gravity that filled the chamber. "Today marks the formal ratification of the Defense Cooperation Treaty between all Alliance species," she announced, her voice a melodious chime that now carried the undeniable weight of experience. "For the first time in our long history, we acknowledge that security cannot be separated from diversity, that different evolutionary paths bring different strengths, all of which are necessary for our collective survival." From his position of honor, Admiral Kalen Vance stood side by side with Commander Zern. Beside them, Captain Arian Jex and Ambassador Cal represented the new alliance that had formed not on a starship, but in the crucible of a shared crisis. A silent, knowing glance passed between Jex and Cal, a moment of shared understanding that spoke louder than any protocol. "Furthermore," Arcanus continued, "the Alliance has unanimously approved the establishment of the Interspecies Academy, dedicated to the ethical exchange of knowledge between all our diverse biologies and technologies. No longer will we allow fear of difference to impede scientific progress that benefits all." From their place among the scientific delegation, Dr. Alara Reed and researcher Vex exchanged satisfied glances. Their joint work on the Scourge's biology had already yielded breakthroughs in medical technology for dozens of species. "And finally," Arcanus concluded, her tone becoming more solemn,
We must acknowledge a truth that recent events have made undeniable. For too long, this council has operated on the assumption that there is one correct path of evolution, one ideal form of civilization. We now recognize this view as not merely limited, but dangerously so. A profound silence fell over the chamber. For the High Counselor herself, to admit such a foundational error was an unprecedented act of humility. "The humans have a saying," Arcanus continued. "Diversity is strength." In their brief time among the stars, they have demonstrated the wisdom of this principle. The Draari, too, have shown us that different does not mean lesser, that adaptation to harsh conditions produces not savagery, but resilience. She gestured toward the human and Draari representatives. When two Deathworld species met, many feared conflict. Instead, they recognized kindred spirits, and in doing so, they taught the rest of us a valuable lesson about looking beyond superficial differences to find common ground. As the formal session concluded and the chamber broke into smaller discussion groups, Captain Jex found himself approached by Counselor Loron. The gelatinous alien rippled with a nervous energy, his colors shifting in what Jex now understood was a sign of genuine admiration. "Captain Jex," Loron greeted, his voice tinged with humility, "I must confess, I observed your unusual tactical maneuvers during the battle. You deliberately took a glancing hit from a scourge vessel to position your ship. It was an act of recklessness that saved a dozen of our cruisers." "We call that a calculated risk, Counselor," Jex replied with a tired, genuine smile. "It's not about being reckless, it's about respecting danger. On Terra, the comfortable choice isn't always the safe choice. Both humans and Draari evolved in environments where complacency could be fatal. We don't fear the fight. We respect it too much to pretend it doesn't exist."
Loron rippled thoughtfully, his color shifting to a deeper, calmer hue. "A profound difference in perspective. It is a lesson we are only just beginning to learn." Across the chamber, Ambassador Kale was engaged in a similar conversation with a group of council scientists, explaining aspects of Draari culture that had previously been misinterpreted as aggression. "Our greeting ritual," he explained, his mandibles clicking softly, "is not a threat display, as many have assumed. It is a demonstration of trust. It shows that, although we are capable of violence, we choose connection instead. On Rakan, you learn that if you waste your strength on unnecessary conflict, you will not survive long enough to have any strength at all." By the end of the day, Admiral Kalen and Commander Zern stood alone at one of the chamber's vast viewports, looking out at the stars. The silence between them was no longer awkward, but a comfortable shared space. "Reflective, Admiral," Zern rumbled, his heavy footsteps announcing his presence. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Kalen replied softly. "A few months ago, most of the beings in this chamber viewed us with suspicion. They were scared. And now," Kalen's lips curled into a small, wry smile, "now they're trying to understand us. That's progress. They're still scared, I think, but they now see value in what they fear." Zern's mandibles twicked, a sound of deep, shared satisfaction. "Indeed, they will never again be able to dismiss us, and, more importantly, they will never forget that when faced with extinction, it was the Deathworlders who saved them." "To Deathworlders, then," Kalen said, raising a hand in a silent final salute, "may we continue to terrorize and protect in equal measure." "To Deathworlders," Zern agreed, "long may we thrive among the stars."